Picture this. It's a blazing hot Thursday afternoon in rural Australia. Kids are splashing at the local swimming pool. A council worker in a high visibility vest drives past, trimming hedges like he does every day. And then, gunshots shatter the peace. Not once, not twice, but multiple times across two different streets. When the smoke clears, 3 people are dead, including a woman who was 7 months pregnant. And a 19-year-old kid who was just fixing his car is fighting for his life in the hospital. The shooter, he vanishes into the vast Australian outback, where some properties are bigger than entire cities, and here's what makes this even more chilling. The police already knew him. He was on bail. He had a history, and one of his victims had reported him before. Now, 12 days later, he's still out there. Police say he could be anywhere, maybe even in a major city, and someone might be helping him hide. This is the Lake Cargelligo massacre. This is the manhunt for Julian Ingram. And this case raises questions that every single one of us needs to be asking about how the system protects or fails to protect victims of domestic violence. Welcome back to Behind the Crime Scene. I'm breaking down one of the most disturbing and controversial cases unfolding right now in Australia, with updates as recent as yesterday. If this is your first time here, this channel dives deep into real criminal cases with verified facts, timelines, and the questions that mainstream media often glosses over. So hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because this story is still developing and you're going to want the follow-up when they finally catch this guy, or if this turns into another months-long manhunt like we've seen before. All right, let's get into it. Lake Cargelligo is a small town in the central west of New South Wales, about 130 kilometres north of Griffith. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Population, around 1,500 people. It's remote, it's quiet, and it's the type of community where a council gardener waving from his truck isn't just normal. It's part of the daily routine. People trust their neighbours. They leave their doors unlocked. Kids ride bikes to the pool without a second thought. January 22nd, 2026 started like any other summer day. Temperatures were already climbing into the low 40s Celsius. That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you watching from the US or other countries. Former local police officer Justin Loxley, who's lived in the area for 20 years, said he saw the man who would later be accused of these murders that very morning. Julian Ingram, a 37-year-old Aboriginal man who worked for the Lachlan Shire Council as a gardener and weeds officer, was out doing his job, trimming trees, maintaining hedges, driving around in his council-issued Ford Ranger with the high-vis markings and the light bar on top. Completely normal, no red flags, no indication that in just a few hours the town would be in lockdown and 3 people would be dead. At around 4:20 in the afternoon, emergency services received reports of gunshots on Bucara Street. When police arrived, they found a man and a woman inside a vehicle, both with fatal gunshot wounds. The man was 32-year-old John Harris. The woman was 25-year-old Sophie Quinn, and she was approximately 7 months pregnant. Let that sink in for a moment. Not just a young woman starting her life, but a mother-to-be and her unborn child, killed in a vehicle in broad daylight. But the horror didn't stop there. Within minutes, police were called to a second location, Walker Street, just a short distance away. There they found 2 more people who had been shot. One of them was 50-year-old Nerida Quinn, Sophie's aunt. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The other was 19-year-old Kaleb MacQueen, who had simply been working on his car when he was caught in the violence. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition with life-threatening injuries. Witnesses, including children who were at the town pool, reported seeing a man firing from inside a vehicle, ramming into objects, and driving erratically through the streets. Can you imagine being a kid, just trying to cool off on a hot day, and suddenly you're witnessing a massacre? The psychological scars in that town are going to last for generations. By the time the sun set that day, Lake Cargelligo was under a lockdown. Police told residents to stay indoors, stay away from windows, and call 000 if they saw anything suspicious. Helicopters circled overhead through the night. Tactical officers were deployed, and the manhunt for Julian Ingram had begun. Before we go any further, I want you to understand who these people were, because they weren't just statistics. They were real people, with families, friends, and futures that were stolen from them. Sophie Quinn was 25 years old, 7 months pregnant, and by all accounts, a young woman full of life. A family member described her as someone who loved her friends, loved her nephews, loved being outdoors, loved her dogs, loved fishing. She was the kind of person who lit up a room, and she was about to become a mother. Her baby, a child who never got the chance to take a single breath, is also considered a victim in this case. When police and the media talk about this crime, they're not just talking about 3 murders. They're talking about 3 lives and an unborn child. Nerida Quinn, Sophie's aunt, was 50 years old and described by family as selfless. She was always there for other people's kids, always putting others first, always showing up when someone needed help. In a small town like Lake Cargelligo, people like Nerida are the glue that holds the community together. Her loss isn't just a family tragedy, it's a community tragedy. John Harris, 32 years old, was found alongside Sophie in the vehicle. While less has been publicly shared about John, his death is no less devastating. He was someone's son, possibly someone's brother or friend, and his life mattered. And then there's Kaleb MacQueen, the 19-year-old survivor. Kaleb wasn't involved in any dispute. He wasn't a target in the traditional sense. He was just a teenager working on his car on a suburban street when bullets tore through his body. He survived, but his life has been forever altered. He suffered serious nerve damage to his shoulder, arm, and ankle. He's now facing weekly trips to Canberra, hours away for plastic surgery and ongoing specialist treatment. His car, the same one he was fixing when he was shot, is now undrivable. The rear window is gone. There's no glass in the passenger door. And because he doesn't have reliable transportation, he started a GoFundMe page just to cover the cost of getting to his medical appointments. Think about that. A 19-year-old kid, nearly killed, now begging strangers on the internet for help just to access the healthcare he desperately needs. So here's my first question for you, and I really want you to think about this. When a pregnant woman is murdered, should that legally count as one victim or 2? Some jurisdictions recognize the unborn child as a separate victim in cases like this. Others don't. What do you think is right? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me why you feel that way. Now let's talk about the man accused of these murders. Julian Ingram, also known as Julian Pierpoint. He's 37 years old, described as being of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander appearance, about 165 to 170 centimetres tall. That's roughly 5'5 to 5'7", with a medium build, short dark hair, and brown eyes. He has multiple tattoos on his arms. On the day of the shooting, he was last seen wearing his council work uniform, a yellow and navy high-visibility shirt, navy cargo pants, black boots, and a red cap. But here's something interesting that police and media have pointed out. When people hear Aboriginal appearance, they often form a mental image based on stereotypes, and that image might not match what Ingram actually looks like in the photos that have been circulated. That's why authorities keep stressing, don't just rely on the description, look at his picture. Study his face. Because if you're walking past him in a grocery store or a gas station, you need to recognize him. Ingram isn't some drifter who passed through town. He's a local. He worked for the Lachlan Shire Council as a gardener and weeds officer, which meant he spent his days driving around remote properties, maintaining parks, clearing weeds, and working in areas most people never see. Before that, he worked on cattle stations and rural properties to the west and north of Lake Cargelligo. Isolated, sprawling land where you can disappear for weeks without anyone knowing. In other words, this is a man who knows the bush. He knows how to survive in extreme heat. He knows where the water sources are, where the old sheds and abandoned buildings are, and how to move through the landscape without being seen. Lachlan Shire Mayor John Metcalfe said it bluntly. I think he would really know how to disappear, hide himself, use relatives or whatever, because once you get west of here, especially at this time of year, it's a very challenging experience to be out there. Translation: if Julian Ingram wants to vanish, he has the skills and the knowledge to do it. But here's where this case goes from tragic to absolutely infuriating. At the time of the shooting, Ingram was not some unknown threat. He was already on the police radar. In fact, he was on bail. Let me repeat that. He was on bail for domestic violence-related charges at the time he allegedly committed a triple murder. Here are the facts, And I want you to pay close attention because this is where the system failed catastrophically. In November 2025, just 2 months before the shooting, Julian Ingram was arrested and charged with 3 offences: stalking and intimidation with intent to cause physical fear or harm, common assault property damage under $2,000. And here's the kicker. Those charges were related to 2 separate incidents involving Sophie Quinn, the same 25-year-old pregnant woman he would later allegedly murder. She had reported him. She had been afraid. And the system knew. Despite these charges, police granted him bail in November. And not just any bail. Bail with conditions. He was required to report to Lake Cargelligo police station once a day. There was an active apprehended violence order, AVO, in place, which is essentially a restraining order designed to keep him away from his alleged victims. He was due back in court in early February 2026 to face those charges. But wait, it gets worse. This wasn't Ingram's first brush with domestic violence. In 2021, he was convicted of grabbing a family member by the throat during an argument after she made a comment about his kids. That's a violent offence. That's someone putting their hands on another person's neck. One of the most dangerous and controlling acts in domestic violence. And yet, 5 years later, with that conviction on his record and new charges pending, he was walking free. Now, let me ask you this, and I want you to really sit with this question. If someone has a history of choking a family member and is then charged with stalking, assault, and intimidation against an ex-partner, should that person ever, under any circumstances, be granted bail? Yes or no? And if your answer is yes, under what conditions? Comment below, because this is the conversation we need to be having. The Nerida police commissioner, in a radio interview just yesterday, was pressed hard on this issue. The interviewer didn't hold back, saying, the officer who granted him bail noted that there could be potential safety concerns, and now 3 people have lost their lives, allegedly at the hands of Julian Ingram. So if there's any concern for safety, shouldn't that be bail denied? The commissioner's response was measured but telling. She acknowledged that police don't always get things right, and emphasised that a critical incident investigation is now underway to examine every interaction police had with Ingram and with the victims. She also pointed out that while police granted bail initially, the court later continued that bail, meaning the judiciary also had a chance to intervene, and didn't. She provided some context, saying that Nerida police respond to over 160,000 domestic and family violence incidents every single year. That's 1 every 3 minutes. And they charge around 33,000 people annually with domestic violence assaults. The implication was clear. The system is overwhelmed. But does being overwhelmed excuse letting someone with a violent history and pending charges walk free until they kill? I'll let you decide. But here's what I think. Sophie Quinn reported him. The system knew. And she's dead. So where is Julian Ingram now? That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is nobody knows. Immediately after the shooting, a massive manhunt was launched. Police helicopters circled Lake Cargelligo through the night. Tactical officers from the Tactical Operations Unit, the Negotiation Unit, Rescue and Bomb Disposal Teams, drone pilots, and rural crime investigators flooded the area. The Australian Defence Force even provided support. Specialist search coordination teams were brought in. This wasn't just a local police matter. This was a full-scale operation. But here's the problem. The area they're searching is absolutely massive. Some of the properties out there are larger than metropolitan Sydney. We're talking tens of thousands of acres of scrubland, bush, dry creek beds, abandoned sheds, and wooded areas. And remember, it's the middle of summer. When the police commissioner visited Lake Cargelligo last week to support the officers on the ground, she said it was 45 degrees Celsius, that's 113 degrees Fahrenheit, for 2 straight days, and it had been over 40 degrees for 5 consecutive days. Imagine trying to conduct a search in that heat, wearing tactical gear, trudging through dense bush where every step could be hiding someone who knows the land better than you do. Ingram was last seen leaving town in his council vehicle, a white Ford Ranger utility with NS registration DM07GZ, featuring council signage, a metal tray back, high visibility markings on the sides, and an emergency light bar on the roof. It's a distinctive vehicle. You'd think it would be easy to spot. But here's the thing. That vehicle still hasn't been found. Police believe he's likely dumped it and switched to another mode of transport, possibly another car, possibly on foot, possibly with help. And that brings me to the next disturbing possibility. Is someone helping him? Police Commissioner Karen Webb stated publicly that she believes Ingram is receiving assistance from unknown persons. Why? Because surviving alone in the Australian outback in the middle of summer with limited resources while being hunted by police helicopters and tactical teams is extraordinarily difficult. You need water, you need food, you need shelter. And if Ingram has managed to evade capture for nearly 2 weeks, the odds are high that someone is helping him. If that's true, if someone is hiding him, feeding him, moving him from place to place, they are committing a serious crime. The Commissioner made it clear anyone shielding him will face the full force of the law. But more than that, she made an emotional appeal saying, "While we allege that he has murdered 3 people and an unborn child, it's really important that the community fear at the moment requires us to resolve this matter. We want to put Mr. Ingram before the court so the community can grieve and move forward." Think about that. A small town of 1,500 people is living in fear. They can't grieve properly because the man accused of killing their neighbours is still out there. Schools are on edge. Parents are keeping their kids inside. And someone somewhere might know exactly where he is. So here's my question for you. If you discovered that a friend or family member was hiding a wanted murderer, what would you do? Would you report them immediately? Would you confront them first? Or would loyalty keep you silent? Be honest. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, your city and your country, because I'm really curious how people from different places view a situation like this. On February 2nd, police revealed a significant update. They believe Ingram may have been seen at a rural property about 3 kilometres south of Mount Hope on Kidman Way in the evening sometime between Saturday, January 24th and Sunday, January 25th, 2 to 3 days after the shooting. Mount Hope is a tiny locality northwest of Lake Cargelligo, and this potential sighting suggests that Ingram didn't flee far initially. Instead, he may have been moving through familiar territory, possibly using properties he knew from his previous work on cattle stations. This is intelligence-led policing at work. Investigators are painstakingly piecing together witness statements, tracking vehicle movements, and analysing dashcam footage to reconstruct his escape route. Police are now urgently appealing to anyone who was driving in that area on those dates, especially truckers, tradies, or farmers with dashcams, to come forward. Even a few seconds of footage showing a vehicle or a person on the side of the road could be the break they need. But here's the chilling part. If he was near Mount Hope on January 25th, where is he now? 10 days later, has he moved interstate? Is he hiding in a major city like Sydney, blending in with the crowds? There was an early report of a sighting in Glebe, an inner-city Sydney suburb, but police investigated and found no credible evidence. Still, the fact that tips are coming in from urban areas shows just how much uncertainty surrounds this case. So let me ask you, do you think Julian Ingram is still in the bush, surviving off the land and help from locals? Or do you think he's already made it to a city, changed his appearance, and is hiding in plain sight? Drop your theory in the comments. While the manhunt continues, another investigation is now underway, and this one is focused on the police themselves. A critical incident investigation has been declared, led by the Homicide Squad from State Crime Command. It will be independently reviewed by the Professional Standards Command and overseen by the Law Enforcement Conduct Commission. In plain English, that means every decision, every interaction, and every piece of paperwork related to Julian Ingram and the victims will be examined with a fine-tooth comb. The investigation will specifically look at Ingram's full domestic violence history and how it was assessed. His access to firearms, he did not have a firearms license, but police confirmed he had access to guns. The decision to grant him bail, the conditions placed on that bail, and whether they were adequate police interactions with Sophie Quinn, and whether her reports were taken seriously, this is not a symbolic review. This is the kind of investigation that can end careers, change policies, and lead to criminal charges if negligence or misconduct is found. And frankly, it needs to happen. Because if the system knew that Julian Ingram was dangerous, if Sophie Quinn asked for help, and if red flags were ignored, then this isn't just about one man who committed a horrific crime. It's about a system that failed to protect a woman who did everything she was supposed to do. Here's a question for you. Do you trust internal police investigations to hold officers accountable? Or do you think these reviews are just for show? Let me know what you think. What happens next? As of right now, February 3rd, 2026, Julian Ingram is still at large. Police say he should be considered armed and dangerous. If you see him or his vehicle, do not approach. Call 000 immediately. If you have information that's not an emergency, contact Crime Stoppers at 1800 333 00 or submit a tip online. Kaleb MacQueen, the 19-year-old survivor, is slowly recovering but faces a long road ahead. His GoFundMe is still active if you want to help him cover the costs of medical travel and vehicle repairs. And honestly, the fact that he has to crowdfund just to access healthcare after being shot is its own tragedy. The families of Sophie Quinn, Nerida Quinn, and John Harris are grieving in a town that's still on edge. Funerals can't bring full closure when the accused killer is still out there. And somewhere, maybe in the bush, maybe in a city, maybe in someone's spare room, Julian Ingram is hiding. The question is, for how long? This case is about so much more than a manhunt. It's about how we as a society treat domestic violence. It's about whether bail laws protect victims or endanger them. It's about whether someone with a history of violence should ever be given a second chance when lives are on the line. And it's about a community that's been shattered and is desperately waiting for justice. So I want to hear from you. Seriously, don't just watch and move on, engage with this. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? City and country. Do you think the bail system failed in this case? Should police be held accountable if someone they released on bail commits murder? And what do you think is going to happen? Will they catch him this week, or is this going to drag on for months? If you found this breakdown valuable and you want updates as this case develops, when he's caught, when charges are formally laid, when the court case begins, make sure you subscribe to Behind the Crime Scene and hit the notification bell. I'll be covering every major update, and I'll also be diving into other cases that expose the cracks in the system. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.